So, you are on stage performing a piece that you know really well, except that you know there is a dreaded octave section coming up. Maybe it's solid octaves, maybe it's a broken octave passage, maybe it's a passage with a lot of fast, loud chords that span an octave, and you just always get fatigued playing it. As you approach it, you instinctively tighten up your muscles. And while you're playing the passage, you start to feel a burning sensation going up your forearm. You start to feel weakness in your fingers. After the passage is over, you just feel weaker in your hands and overall fatigued as you finish the piece. Does this sound familiar? This might even happen to you when you're practicing. Maybe you know a piece really, really well, but there's this one passage that every time you play it, you're like, oh my gosh, that was just so tiring. Part of the pianistic tradition consists of pieces designed to showcase virtuosity, and you don't get much more virtuosic than long octave passage work. Fatigue and stamina are big topics in learning the piano, and not only do I work with my students on this regularly, but I also deal with this in my own playing like pretty much every other pianist. I recently received a viewer request asking me to address this topic of stamina as a kind of follow-up video to my recent video that I made on playing octaves. After thinking about it for a while, I came up with 8 suggestions on how to deal with fatigue and increase your stamina when you play octaves at the piano. There's a lot I wanted to say about this topic, so rather than leave out things that I think could be helpful to you, I decided to divide it up so that the videos don't get overly long. So in today's video, I'm going to share the first 4 ideas, and in my next video, I'm going to share the other 4. But before I get to that, I want to tell my return viewers that I am coming to you from Butler University. This is my teaching studio. I had to move my whole production into Butler University because we're currently having work done on our house and I couldn't live there anymore. And so here I am, I've moved everything in, but my teaching studio was just recently repainted, so there's nothing on the walls. There's stacks of things in boxes, and I put the sheet up behind the piano because there's a mirror here, and you can see that could be very confusing visually if you're watching a video, and then there's like reflections and there's light and all that stuff in there. So it looks a little bit like a work in progress, but this is where we're at, and over the course of the coming weeks I'm going to make it a little bit more homey in here. Now, when you get fatigued while playing the piano, that means that something in your playing mechanism is accumulating tension over the course of your performance. Ideally, you want to play something at the piano and then reset your muscles to your initial state of relaxation, and do that over and over. One of the most pernicious myths about playing the piano is this idea that you have to be relaxed all the time and that tension is the enemy. Actually, it's not necessary or even possible to play the piano and be relaxed all the time. If you were totally relaxed, you wouldn't even be able to sit at the piano. If you were totally relaxed, you wouldn't even be able to keep your hand on the keys because your arm would just fall to your side. If you were totally relaxed, your fingers wouldn't even be able to push the keys down. So some tension is actually needed. The place where the idea of relaxation gets tricky is that you do need to have moments of tension, but the tension needs to be strategic and it needs to be in the right places and at the right times. Now, this is much easier said than done, which is why we are all lifelong students of the piano. As you play the piano, ideally, you want to use the fast twitch muscle fibers in your hands and arms to engage very quickly and then release again. Now, I'm no physician, I'm no physical therapist, but I do understand that there are 2 different kinds of muscle fibers. There are slow twitch muscle fibers that are responsible for endurance. So for example, think of running a marathon. And there are also fast twitch muscle fibers that are responsible for very quick, short bursts of exertion. So for example, think of sprinting. All muscles have both slow and fast twitch fibers, and we hear a lot about these in the world of sports and sports medicine in terms of developing fast twitch fibers for sports like sprinting. But even the muscles in your arms have fast twitch fibers that you use to play bursts of loud, powerful passage work on the piano. So when you get fatigued playing a long passage, it's because you're engaging your fast twitch muscles to play something, but not releasing them. And so lactic acid is building up in them, and the tension keeps accumulating and overworking your muscles, which makes you sore. The solution is twofold. You need to use the right muscles when flexing, and you also need to reset between these moments of maximum intensity. Think of each physical motion as starting from a place of relaxation and returning to a place of relaxation. Another way to think about it is that you start at rest and you return to a place of being at rest. You need to find your default set point of being at rest. And you'll do small, vigorous motions that require exertion, and then you'll reset. Then you'll repeat with another small, vigorous motion that requires exertion. Then you'll reset. Then you'll repeat. Then you'll reset. You'll have moments of tension, but they won't accumulate because you're constantly relaxing in between them. For a long passage, this means you'll do identical, repeated motions with moments of resetting in between them, rather than just one long motion over the course of an entire passage that accumulates tension. When talking about fatigue and stamina, it's crucial to differentiate between fatigue and pain. Fatigue can be slightly uncomfortable, and if it's allowed to build up and it's not addressed, it can lead to pain or injury. Consider fatigue to be smoke and pain to be a fire. Fatigue can serve as a warning sign that you need to look more carefully at what you're doing and make an adjustment in your technical approach. There are some things at the piano that just are inherently fatiguing, and you don't want to practice them over and over and over and over without a break. This is exactly the same in sports. If you're a sprinter, for example, you don't just sprint over and over. You have to think about it, you have to plan, you have to prepare for it, and then you sprint, you go for it. But then right after that, you recover, you reset, you assess, before you plan and repeat the next sprint. But for some reason, we pianists sometimes develop a mindset that we're just going to play and play and play and play the piano without a break, regardless of any fatigue or other physical feedback that we're receiving. Being a musician is a physical activity. You are like an athlete if you play the piano. Even though you're sitting, you're working your muscles, your brain, your intellect, and your emotions. And so you need to treat your body accordingly. Now, you might feel that you are an exception. Maybe you're young and youthful. Maybe you're very in shape physically. Maybe you feel that you can push through the pain or discomfort that you have and just ignore it. Now, that might work for a little while. You might not have any negative consequences from doing that for years, but ideally, I'm assuming that you want to play the piano for your whole life, and these issues can accumulate over the course of your lifetime. Take this analogy. If a wheel on a car is out of alignment and it's wobbly, you can still drive the car around for a while just fine. You can get places, you can do your errands, go to the grocery store, come back and forth. That's all totally fine. That works. However, over time, it's going to cause problems with being able to drive your car. Eventually, you could get to the point where you don't steer it right or where the wheel is even going to fall off, right? So it's important to maintain self-awareness and to listen to your own body's feedback. And if you experience fatigue, really take the time to assess what you're doing, exactly what you've been practicing that led to that feeling of fatigue. And from there, look and see what you can adjust. What can you release? Find the small groups and release in between them. Over this video and the next video, I'm going to share 8 suggestions for you about how to play octave passages with speed and stamina. Anything in this arena of technique, especially advanced technique, is really specific to the way you are approaching the keyboard. And it's going to be also specific to the particular piece or passage that you are working on. Now, if you're watching this video in the hopes that you can find relief for a difficult octave or broken octave passage that you're working on, my suggestion is that after watching this video and the next video, you take a camera and you record yourself playing the difficult passage and see if you can discern how some of these suggestions could apply to your own situation. So here are my first 4 suggestions on how to play fast octaves and chords with speed and stamina. The first suggestion is to ruthlessly study your playing to maximize efficient motions. At a fast tempo, efficiency is key. Even minor adjustments can have a huge effect. If you're building a house and you get off by a 1/4 inch, it won't make a big difference. But if you are building an intricate, tiny jewelry box and you get off by a 1/4 inch, it's going to destroy all of the proportions and the shape, like the lid might not even close. The same is true of playing. If you're playing slowly at the piano and you're not totally efficient, it won't matter as much. But if you are playing a rapid, challenging, virtuosic passage and you are not moving efficiently, it will result in a lot of wasted motion, which can compound and create feelings of fatigue. This example has jumping octaves, and I need to focus on moving very efficiently between them. This is how it goes in slow motion. So you can see it's easy to just play and move it when I have all the time in the world. But if I'm going fast and I'm doing a big up and down motion and I'm not moving efficiently with my arm, I'm going to have problems. Right? That's too much motion. So the way to practice that is to go way down into slow motion and move extremely directly from one note to the next without a lot of extra motion. I want to play on the edge of the key as well because that has the least amount of resistance. So playing with more efficient motions looks closer to this. My second suggestion is to release in the direction of the next note. Part of being efficient involves releasing in the direction of the next note. We think too often of the idea of playing down into the key and then lifting up with your hands and going over to the next key and then playing down into it. I think that's because the keys operate vertically. But in fact, it's more efficient to play into the key and then release diagonally or elliptically in the direction of the next note. In this example, I'm going to play a note and then release in the direction of the next note. Here's the A, first note. I'm going to release this direction, and then I play the G sharp, and I move immediately. Again, if I was playing slowly, I would just play, it wouldn't matter if I went straight down and then, but at a fast tempo, I don't have time. So I'm always going to want to be thinking at least a note ahead so I know what direction to release in. Here's an example of going down and up in octaves. This is how it goes slowly. Right? And so I'm going to play the first note, and my next note is a G sharp, so I'm already going to start moving. Moving always to the new notes. So when it's fast. My third suggestion for you today is to relax between octaves. One of the biggest problems I run into when teaching how to play with stamina is that students frequently fix their hands into a tense, tight position and then use their entire forearm to play repeated octaves. While this isn't ideal, this can work fine at a slower tempo or for a very short octave passage, but you will probably find that you get tired when you play like this because it's extremely fatiguing to keep the hand locked into place like that. Remember what I said about the fast twitch muscle fibers? You need to engage them and then release them. So the answer is to build in tiny little moments of relaxation between octave. The purpose of this specifically is to teach the thumb to relax this muscle right here as well as the palm of the hand. This does not need to be flexed in order to play multiple octaves in a row. You can practice relaxing between octaves by playing into the keys with your wrist and then lifting your arms out over the keys and shaking your thumbs out. Then do 2 in a row and shake your thumbs out. Then do 3 in a row and shake your thumbs out. This is what it looks like to practice releasing this muscle in the thumb. So I'm going to play the same passage I played earlier from the Shostakovich Second Concerto, and I'm just going to play into the key by tapping from the wrist, and then I'm going to release, I'm going to kind of close my hand over the keys, and then I'm going to move into the next. And what I'm practicing here is releasing there and there. Release, release, release. So a lot of times you will find, if you're not used to doing that quick release, that you will play and then your hand will stay flexed like that. Like your hand will actually, this muscle will literally stay engaged. And so the thing is, when you do that, it just causes excess tension. So you can still play fast, but you're doing a micro release between octaves. My fourth suggestion is to maintain a supple hand and to play the octaves by tapping or hinging at the wrist. This is related to my earlier point about relaxation. You need to be sure to have a supple hand, not a brittle hand, when you're playing octaves, and you need to play lightly from the wrist. Other words for supple are limber, agile, pliant. You will need a fixed hand position to play long octave passages, but you don't want to have a tight hand position. You don't have time, if you're playing a long octave passage, to like release your hand and do this between each one. You do need to keep your hand extended, but you don't want it to be tight and flexed. What I mean when I say to have a supple hand is that you want the hand to have a feeling of flexibility, like a comfortable leather glove, not a rigid plastic mold of a hand. You want the palm of the hand, the muscle at the base of the hand, and the wrist to have a feeling of looseness inside the hand when you play. The best way I can think of to practice this is the same as what I just discussed in my earlier point. Practice playing a note and then quickly resetting. You want to be able to play something and then immediately go back to your relaxed state. What happens often is that people play and then there's residual tension. It looks really similar if somebody plays with a tight fixed hand versus a relaxed fixed hand. And so this is where it's important to focus on the sensation inside your own hand and check that you're not flexing those muscles. So if I play a Chopin passage with a supple hand, tapping from the wrist, it looks like this. Now, what I'll do is I'll fix my hand into place and I'll play it again from the arm. Can you see that my hand doesn't look that different to the eye? But inside my hand, I feel much less tight. Training yourself to immediately bounce back to a state of relaxation or release and maintaining the feeling of a supple hand is key. While you're waiting for next week's video, you might want to check out these videos on technique here and here, where I talk about the role of the wrist and the thumb in piano technique. In my next video, I'm going to take it from here and I'm going to share the next 4 suggestions I have to address fatigue and playing octave passages. I'll see you in my next video, and happy practicing.